All right, settle in 90s fans, because we're going deep on a show that's way more than just a sitcom. Yeah, it's Frasier.
Yeah.
You know, that spinoff of Cheers
Yeah.
that somehow won a ridiculous 37 Emmys.
Wow.
We're going to figure out what made this show such a hit back in the 90s and why it still holds a special place, in our hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, if you like what you're hearing, don't forget to hit subscribe and spread the 90s love by telling your friends about that 90s pod.
So what's really interesting about Frasier is that it premiered in 1993, a time of, massive changes culturally. The Cold War was ending, the internet was taking off, and society was grappling with all sorts of changing values.
Yeah.
TV was changing too, becoming more complex and, daring to explore real-life issues, and Frasier really captured that.
Okay, so unpack that a little bit for us.
Yeah.
How did Frasier actually reflect these changing times? It was a sitcom, not a documentary, right?
Right. It's all in the characters and the writing.
Yeah.
You have to remember, these weren't your typical sitcom stereotypes.
Yeah.
Frasier and Niles, these highly educated and, somewhat pretentious psychiatrists, they were navigating life in a way that resonated with a generation that was really grappling with ambition, success, and the search for meaning.
Yeah.
And then you had their dad, Martin, this salt-of-the-earth, blue-collar cop who just brought a completely different perspective.
So it's kind of like
Yeah.
a perfect storm of cultural contrast all wrapped up in this hilarious family.
Exactly. And that's what made it so relatable. You had the intellectual elite clashing with the working class, but it was done with so much warmth and humor that it never felt preachy or judgmental. Plus, it tapped into this growing awareness of mental health,
Right.
which was pretty groundbreaking for a
Yes.
sitcom back then.
That's right. I mean, therapy wasn't really a common topic. On primetime TV in the early 90s, was Frasier one of the first shows to actually normalize talking about feelings and seeking help?
Yeah, it was definitely a pioneer. Have to remember, this was a time when therapy was still really stigmatized by a lot of people. And by making Frasier a psychiatrist
Yeah.
and incorporating those therapy sessions into the storyline,
Yeah.
it helped destigmatize mental health and make it more acceptable to just talk about emotions openly.
Yeah, and it did it in a way that was both funny and insightful, right?
Yeah.
You could laugh at Frasier's sometimes pompous therapy sessions,
Yeah.
but you also got a glimpse into the struggles and vulnerabilities of these characters. It made therapy feel more human and less intimidating.
That's a really important point. It wasn't just about normalizing therapy. It was also about showing that even successful, seemingly perfect people can benefit from, talking to someone.
Yeah.
It made mental health relatable to a much wider audience.
So in a way, Frasier was kind of holding up a mirror to society's changing attitudes towards mental health and saying, hey, it's okay to talk about this stuff. It's okay to ask for help.
Exactly. I think that resonated deeply with viewers, especially those who maybe were struggling in silence with their own mental health challenges.
Which brings us to the show's just incredible humor. How did they pull off this unique blend of highbrow and lowbrow comedy? I mean, you had opera references mixed with slapstick, intellectual debates right alongside fart jokes. Shouldn't have worked, but it did.
It's a testament to the brilliance of the writing and just the impeccable comedic timing of the cast.
Yeah.
They were masters at crafting jokes that worked on multiple levels. You could appreciate the intellectual humor, but even if you didn't catch every Shakespearean reference, you could still laugh at the physical comedy or the witty banter.
It was they were constantly playing with this tension between sophistication and silliness.
Yeah.
And it never got old. No wonder they won so many awards.
Speaking of awards, it's interesting to think about how Frasier's success might have influenced other sitcoms that came after it, shows like The Office, Parks and Recreation, even Modern Family. They all share this ability to blend humor with heart and create characters that are both funny and flawed.
So you're saying that Frasier might have actually paved the way for a whole new generation
Yeah.
of smart character-driven sitcoms.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. Frasier proved that audiences were hungry for something more than just cheap laughs. They wanted characters they could connect with, storylines that reflected their own lives, and humor that was both intelligent and accessible.
Thinking about all this, it makes me want to just rewatch the entire series. And hey, listeners, if you're feeling the same way, we'd love to have you join us on this nostalgia trip. Don't forget to subscribe to that 90s pod and tell your friends to join the party. We're serving up a fresh batch of 90s goodness every week.
You got it. Now, before we get too lost in our Frasier reminiscing, let's dive into some of the specific details that made this show so iconic. Starting with the characters themselves. I mean, who could forget? The Crane brothers' hilarious sibling rivalry.
Oh, man. That was pure gold. Frasier, the slightly pompous older brother, always trying to maintain his composure. While Niles, the more neurotic younger brother,
Yeah.
constantly tried to one-up him.
Right. And then there's their father, Martin, the polar opposite of his sons, who brought this much-needed dose of common sense and grounded humor.
It's like they were three completely different planets orbiting around each other, creating this gravitational pull of comedic brilliance.
Yeah, their dynamic was genius because it allowed the writers to explore all sorts of themes, class ambition, family, and even that clash between intellectualism and practicality,
Right.
all within this framework of like a hilarious and heartwarming sitcom.
And we can't forget the amazing female characters.
Yeah.
Like Roz, the sassy and independent radio producer, and Daphne, the quirky British housekeeper, who had like even more depth and humor to the ensemble.
Absolutely. The women of Frasier were just as complex and well-developed as their male counterparts. They were strong, independent, and, brought their own unique perspective.
So it's clear that Frasier was like carefully crafted to appeal to a wide audience while still staying true to his like unique voice. But how do they manage to keep that balance for like 11 seasons?
That's a great question. And it brings us to one of like
Yeah.
the most important elements
Right.
of the show's success. It's consistency.
Consistency. You mean the fact that they managed to maintain that same level of quality and humor for over a decade?
Exactly. Frasier is a masterclass in consistent storytelling. The characters remain true to themselves, the humor never felt stale, and the storylines always felt fresh and engaging.
Yeah, I guess that's why it's still so enjoyable to watch today. It's like slipping into a warm bath, a familiar comfort and witty banter.
It's funny how certain shows become so ingrained in our cultural memory. Frasier is one of those shows that's become more than just entertainment. It's a touchstone for like a particular time and place.
Yeah.
A reminder of this bygone era when sitcoms were smart, sophisticated, and genuinely heartwarming.
And it reminds us that no matter how much the world changes, some things remain timeless. You know the importance of family, the search for connection, and the power of a good laugh. But hey, speaking of timeless, how about we take a quick trip down memory lane and revisit some of those iconic Frasier moments that still make us chuckle today?
Yeah, let's do it. Remember the episode where Frasier tries to impress a date by pretending to be a wine connoisseur, only to have his facade like completely crumble?
Oh yeah, classic Frasier. Always trying to be something he's not. Or how about all those times he and Niles tried to outdo each other with their sophisticated tastes, whether it was art, music, or even coffee?
Oh yeah, their sibling rivalry was truly a gift to comedy. And who could forget Martin's classic one-liners, always delivered with that perfect deadpan.
Oh yeah, every episode was just packed with these little gems of humor, these moments that perfectly captured the characters' quirks and foibles.
And let's not forget the running gags, like Niles' unrequited love for Daphne, or Frasier's constant struggle to find a fulfilling romantic relationship.
Right. Amazing how they managed to keep those running gags fresh and funny for so long. A testament to the writer's creativity and the actor's ability to, bring those characters to life.
Speaking of bringing characters to life, did you know that David Hyde Pierce almost wasn't Niles?
Wait, what? No way. Can you imagine anyone else playing that role?
It's hard to picture now, isn't it? He was just so perfect as the neurotic, uptight, yet endearing younger brother.
Totally. And speaking of perfect casting, Kelsey Grammer wasn't just the star of the show. He was also a producer. He had a huge hand in shaping Frasier's direction.
Yeah.
Pretty impressive.
It is. It's a testament to his dedication and his deep understanding of the character. He knew Frasier inside and out, and it shows in every episode.
It's amazing how much thought and care
Yeah.
went into creating this show.
Yeah.
From the writing to the casting to the music, everything was meticulously crafted to create this unique and unforgettable viewing experience.
And speaking of unforgettable, who could forget that iconic theme song, Tossed Salads and Scrambled Eggs?
That song is pure 90s magic. So catchy, sophisticated, and it just perfectly captures the essence of the show.
And get this, Kelsey Grammer himself wrote and performed it.
No way. I had no idea.
It's true.
That just adds another layer of awesomeness to the whole Frasier experience.
It really does. And speaking of the Frasier experience, I think we've only just scratched the surface of what made this show so special. There's so much more to explore, from its groundbreaking approach to mental health, to its subtle social commentary, to its lasting impact on pop culture.
And that's exactly what we'll be diving into in the next part of our deep dive. But before we go, we have a little challenge for you listeners.
Okay.
Think back to your favorite Frasier moments. The jokes that made you laugh out loud, the storylines that touched your heart, the characters that you just couldn't get enough of. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
So head over to our social media pages and share your Frasier memories with us. And while you're there, don't forget to hit that follow button and tell your friends about that 90s pod.
We'll be right back with more Frasier goodness after a quick break.
Welcome back, 90s enthusiasts, to our deep dives into the world of Frasier. Before we left off, we were talking about some of those unforgettable Frasier moments.
Yeah, it's amazing how those little snippets of dialogue and hilarious situations can, stay with you for years, right?
It really is, and it just speaks to the power of well-crafted comedy,
Yeah.
to create those lasting memories and cultural touchstones. But let's move beyond those individual moments and delve deeper into some of the broader themes that Frasier explored so brilliantly.
Yeah.
Like, for example, we touched on the show's groundbreaking approach to mental health earlier.
Yeah, it was pretty revolutionary for a sitcom in the 90s to portray therapy in such a nuanced and, dare I say, humorous way. What are your thoughts on how Frasier tackled this sensitive subject?
Well, I think the key was that it never felt preachy or exploitative.
Mhm.
Frasier as a psychiatrist was obviously well-versed in the world of therapy,
Yeah.
but he was also a flawed human being with his own insecurities and hang-ups. So he wasn't like some perfect therapist, dispensing wisdom from on high. He was right there in the trenches with everyone else figuring things out as he went along.
Exactly. And by showing Frasier's own struggles with therapy, the show made it clear that seeking help is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength and a commitment to personal growth.
Yeah, and it also helped that the show didn't shy away from humor. I mean, those therapy sessions often led to some of the funniest moments, whether it was Frasier's patients revealing their bizarre problems or Frasier himself getting caught up in his own psychological knots.
That's such a crucial point. Humor can be an incredibly powerful tool for breaking down stigma and making those difficult topics more approachable. And Frasier understood this. They used humor to their advantage, creating a space where viewers could laugh at the absurdity of life while also gaining valuable insights into human nature.
And let's not forget the impact that Frasier's portrayal of therapy had on viewers. I've heard countless stories from people who say that the show inspired them to seek help for their own mental health challenges.
It's pretty amazing to think that a sitcom could have such a profound impact on people's lives. But it just goes to show how powerful entertainment can be when it tackles those important issues with sensitivity, humor, and authenticity.
Speaking of tackling important issues,
Yeah.
Frasier also subtly addressed those issues of social class and economic disparity through the dynamic between the Crane brothers and their father.
Yeah.
We talked about this earlier, but I think it's worth digging a little deeper.
Absolutely. On the surface, you had these two highly educated, sophisticated psychiatrists living in a luxurious apartment, while their father, a blue-collar cop, was often portrayed as the odd man out. But the show never mocked or belittled Martin's background. Instead, it celebrated his practicality, his common sense, and his grounded worldview.
It was like they were saying, hey, there's value in all walks of life.
Yeah,
You don't have to have a fancy degree to be intelligent or insightful.
precisely. And by showcasing the respect and affection that existed between the Crane brothers and their father, the show subtly challenged those societal hierarchies that often place intellectualism above other forms of intelligence.
Yeah, it was a really clever way to address those complex issues without hitting the audience over the head with a message. It felt organic and authentic to the characters and their relationships.
Which brings us to another key element of Frasier's enduring appeal, its heart. Beneath all the witty banter and intellectual sparring, there's a deep well of love and compassion between these characters. You could tell that they genuinely cared about each other even when they were driving each other crazy.
Right. That's what made those moments of conflict and tension so relatable. We all have those family members who push our buttons, but at the end of the day, we love them anyway. And Frasier captured that dynamic perfectly.
It was a show that celebrated the complexities of family relationships, both the joys and the frustrations. And it reminded us that even when we disagree with our loved ones, those bonds are unbreakable.
It's remarkable how Frasier managed to balance all of these elements,
Yeah.
the humor, the heart, the social commentary, so seamlessly. It's no wonder that the show is still considered one of the greatest sitcoms of all time.
Yeah, it really is a testament to the incredible talent of everyone involved, the writers, the actors, the directors, the producers. They created a show that was not only hilarious, but also intelligent, insightful, and deeply human.
Well, it's like they bottled the essence of the 90s with all its complexities and contradictions and transformed it into this timeless work of art.
And speaking of timeless, let's take a moment to appreciate the show's incredible legacy. Frasier didn't just entertain, it influenced. It paved the way for a whole new generation of sitcoms that embraced character depth, intellectual humor, and emotional honesty.
We talked about shows like The Office and Parks and Recreation earlier, but I think the influence of Frasier can be seen in countless other shows as well. It's like it raised the bar for what a sitcom could be.
Right, and it proved that audiences were hungry for something more than just cheap laughs. They wanted shows that made them think, feel, and connect with characters on a deeper level, and Frasier delivered on all those fronts.
You know, all this talk about Frasier's legacy makes me wonder how the show would fare in today's world. Would it still resonate with audiences who are used to a much different kind of comedy? What do you think?
That's a fascinating question. I think Frasier's themes, family ambition, love loss, the search for meaning, are timeless and universal. But the way those themes are explored would undoubtedly be different in today's world.
For example, imagine Frasier hosting a podcast instead of a radio show, or Niles trying to navigate the complexities of social media, or Martin grappling with the ever-changing world of technology.
The possibilities are endless. It's fun to imagine how those characters would react to the challenges and opportunities of the 21st century.
Maybe they'd even tackle some of the hot-button issues of our time: climate change, social justice, political polarization.
Huh.
I could totally see Frasier getting into a heated debate about cancel culture on his podcast.
Or Niles trying to impress a date with his knowledge of sustainable living.
It's amazing how those characters feel so real and relatable that we can easily imagine them navigating the modern world. But I have a feeling that no matter what era Frasier was set in the heart of the show, that witty banter, that sibling rivalry, that unwavering love between family members would remain the same.
And that's ultimately what makes Frasier such an enduring and beloved show. It's a celebration of the human experience with all its flaws and foibles. It's a reminder that life is messy and unpredictable, but it's also filled with laughter, love, and connection.
And speaking of connection, we'd love to connect with you, our listeners. We're curious to hear your thoughts on Frasier, your favorite episodes, your favorite characters, your favorite moments. So head over to our social media pages and share your memories with us.
And while you're at it, spread the 90s love by telling your friends about that 90s pod. We're here to keep the nostalgia flowing one deep dive at a time. But for now, let's take a moment to reflect on the incredible legacy of Frasier, a show that continues to entertain, inspire, and remind us of the power of human connection.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the world of Frasier. But stay tuned because we'll be right back with some final thoughts and a little something to ponder as we bid farewell to this iconic sitcom. Okay, and we're back for our final thoughts on Frasier. We've talked about a lot, from the cultural impact to its approach to mental health to its legacy.
Yeah, it's been so interesting, peeling back the layers of this seemingly simple sitcom. But before we say goodbye to the world of Frasier, I think it's good to leave our listeners with something to really think about.
All right, hit us with it. What's got your intellectual gears turning?
So we talked about how Frasier reflected the 90s, right? But how do you think the show would tackle some of the big issues of today? Could you even imagine Frasier dealing with social media influencers or, the whole world of online dating?
Oh, that's a great question. I can practically see Frasier trying to keep his cool while responding to some snarky comment on, his latest podcast episode.
Yeah.
Or Niles, trying to craft the perfect online dating profile, agonizing over every single word.
Oh, totally.
And picking just the right photo
Yeah.
to show off, how smart he is.
Can you imagine Martin trying to keep up with all the new gadgets?
Oh my God.
While Daphne is desperately trying to teach him how to use a smartphone?
He'd probably still be clinging to his rotary phone and newspaper.
Oh, for sure.
But think about the storylines. I mean, Frasier could be grappling with, the ethics of doing therapy online. Roz navigating that whole cutthroat world of podcasting.
Yeah.
Daphne trying to balance family life with, her newfound love of social media.
Yeah, it's really fun to imagine how those characters, with their unique personalities and all their quirks, how they'd handle all the, chaos of the 21st century. It just shows how brilliant the creators were that, all these years later, we can still see these characters growing and changing.
It's like they really understood something timeless and universal about being human, Our anxieties, our hopes, our relationships, our constant search for meaning and connection. And those things are just as important now as they were back in the 90s, maybe even more so.
Yeah.
In our crazy, fast-paced digital world.
Exactly. And that's why I think Frasier still resonates even with people who weren't even alive when it first aired.
Yeah.
It reminds us that, no matter how much technology changes or culture changes, some things never do.
Right.
Our need for love and laughter and a sense of belonging.
So listeners, we have a little challenge for you. Imagine your own modern-day Frasier episode. What would they be dealing with? What kind of humor would they use? And most importantly, would they still be able to make us laugh, think, and feel all at the same time?
Let us know your ideas on social media or send us an email. We'd love to hear your creative takes on, how Frasier could make it in the 21st century.
And if you're feeling nostalgic and want to rewatch the original series, we highly recommend it. You might be surprised how well the jokes hold up and how relevant the themes still are.
It just goes to show the power of great writing and characters that really stick with you.
Well, that brings us to the end of our Frasier deep dive. We hope you enjoyed this trip back to the 90s.
And don't forget to subscribe to that 90s pod for more deep dives into your favorite shows, movies, music, and everything 90s.
We'll be back soon with another dose of 90s goodness. But until then, keep the spirit of the 90s alive. And remember, in the words of the great Dr. Frasier Crane, I am listening.